Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Matthew Schreiner podcast. Hallelujah, he is risen. Today's episode will look at the Easter Octave, and for that fact, we'll look at the rest of the Easter season. I'd originally intended for this video to be released on Monday, which, regardless, Monday's video was pushed until Tuesday, and because of the passing of Pope Francis on Monday, I decided that news was more pressing for a video to be made than for my idea for this video. And regardless, Easter does not just end on Sunday, and it does not end on this Sunday, the coming Sunday, either. Rather, the Easter season continues for an entire 50 days afterwards. Also, Trent Horn released a video about the resurrection on Wednesday, and I have a feeling that, like me, he intended for the video to be released on Monday, but pushed it later on into the week for the same reason. I want to make one announcement. I've been working since about the beginning of April on another blog. This blog is called Liturgical Review, and for those of you listening to this on audio or video, I will try to leave a link in the description to the blog, if possible, or not to the blog, for the blog, on the description of the video or of the audio, if possible. I know it will work on YouTube, but I'm not so sure about how it will work on Spotify. But regardless, on this blog, we look at things related to Catholic liturgy. So besides that, I am still working on blog posts on my main Matthew Schreiner blog, which I will also try and leave a link to in the description to. I currently upload text-only versions of my scripts for these videos on the blog. I have also been experimenting with Blogger, which is the back end of the blogs, and especially on the Liturgical Review blog site. Using Blogger, you can kind of have a very simple website, which is what Liturgical Review has and what I'm working on, and what I am considering doing with my main Matthew Schreiner blog. You can also have custom domains on Blogger, which is something which I have to experiment with. Besides that, one announcement relating to the Matthew Schreiner podcast. I have officially made the Matthew Schreiner podcast and all previous episodes of it and all future episodes of it an official podcast on YouTube. And so I was able to make a podcast on Spotify and now it will show up, or a podcast on YouTube and now it'll show up. All podcasts on YouTube really are glorified playlists, which I looked into it because I saw on one YouTube video that I was watching that he had a little tag in the video description, and so I really like that, and so now all episodes of the Matthew Schreiner podcast, which are uploaded to the YouTube channel, will be included on there. Also, by the way, a little fun fact, there is at least now, and probably that is how it will remain, at least for a while, one more episode of the Matthew Schreiner podcast on Spotify than there is on YouTube. This is because the first episode of the Matthew Schreiner podcast was an audio-only one featured on RSS and brought into Spotify and other podcast places. Now episodes are only on Spotify and YouTube, and I believe the show used to be on Apple Podcasts, but now it is only found on Spotify and one other obscure podcast place. And of course, all episodes are here on YouTube, which is the primary place that I will be uploading. Anyways, Easter has come once again. Easter is more than just a time for egg hunts, rabbits, hams, dyed eggs, and lamb cakes. Don't get me wrong, these things are all great parts of Easter, most especially coming together to celebrate as a family. But above all, we must understand truly what Easter means, truly what it means to us as Catholic Christians, truly why it is such a big deal. The Easter Vigil is part of Easter and the beginning of the celebration of our Lord's resurrection. The Easter Vigil was and still is the traditional night on which catechumens enter into the church. The Vigil is the principal and most important of all Vigil celebrations. The Easter Vigil is a very special vigil. Part of the Easter Vigil, and even part of the Easter Mass, is the renewal of baptismal promises. As one priest likes to point out, these are the oldest promises we have as a church, the promises for which saints and martyrs died. In these promises, we renounce sin and Satan, accepting God and living in his light. Above all, the Easter Vigil recalls not only Christ's resurrection, but the time he spent in the underworld, and by that defeating sin and Satan and evil. The Easter Vigil reminds us of our salvation, won for us by the death of Christ. But above all, we recall more importantly his resurrection from the dead. By his death, he won for us salvation, and by his rising again, he shows us the victory he had over sin and death. And this joy that we have that he is risen and that he lives again is Easter. And just as Christ did not rise and then immediately leave his apostles, we celebrate Easter, first of all, for an entire week. We can say that just as Christ did not appear all at once in one place, and the joy of the resurrection lasted with the apostles for a longer time, as he appeared to them in different places, so too our joy for Easter lasts an entire week. But just as he did not stay with the apostles for 1 week, but rather stayed with them for 50 days, so we continue to celebrate Easter and Christ's resurrection, not just for a week, although the joy and fullness of Easter lasts for the entire Octave week. We continue to celebrate Christ as he appeared risen and stayed with the apostles throughout the 50 days of Easter. As I said in the last video about the passing of Pope Francis, we are a people who celebrate our lives centered around Easter, as we, like Christ, hope to be resurrected as he promised on the last day. In baptism, we die to ourselves and rise to be transfigured and joined to Christ. This year, throughout Europe and the United States, especially in England and France, for some reason my script says England and London, which makes no sense. London's part of England. But I meant England and Paris. There were record numbers of baptisms of people joining into Christ Church, which he himself founded. Of course, I talked about in the Holy Thursday video how there is this silent killer almost within the church of people leaving. And Trent Horn talked about this too, about how it might seem in some polls that we're gaining numbers, but it's minute compared to Protestants. But truly, this Easter proves that there still is interest and still are people joining the church in great and large numbers. This Easter, let us remember Christ and share truly in his paschal joy, the celebration of the new life he won for us, and the true event of the resurrection of Christ, who came to earth and taught and built a church for our salvation, for which he gave his life through death and sin, and built a church for our salvation, for which he gave his life, which he dying, he thought death and sin, and won victorious, and then rose again. God bless, and have a blessed Easter season.